all you're going to care about is your family and the people you love, ultimately. You're not going to care about what job you did, how much money you have, nothing. So ultimately, just try and live your life being mindful that one day it will end. And so try and just deal with every day as it comes and just try and make the most of it and be happy.
That's the voice of Patricia Backley. Today on Living Being Mindfully, I am so excited to be connected with Pat Backley. Pat truly has an inspirational story, full of twists, turns, joys, and challenges. Pat found the love of writing in her early 70s, and in the last 3 years, Pat has authored 8 books, including the popular Abandoned Wives Handbook, which has received many accolades. Listen in as Pat shares her beautiful journey through challenge, scarcity, and loss, all the way to joy, peace, and empowerment. We start by sharing a little bit about our commonalities, which for me was a lovely walk down memory lane. And then Pat tells us a little bit about growing up in England, traveling, and eventually finding her way to New Zealand, where she currently lives today. In this warm, honest, heartfelt conversation, one of my favorite kinds, Pat chats openly about romance, mortality, and the importance of staying open to possibilities even in our later years. Pat goes on to share some practical tips and strategies about traveling solo, staying hopeful even when things are hard, and cultivating a never too late attitude, which she models so well. And no surprise, Pat wraps it all up with some wise sage advice. Of course, the links to Pat and all her work will be in the show notes. Lastly, a couple of quick community announcements. You know, everything we do here, from the podcast to the books to the communities, is all about supporting and inspiring you to live a longer, stronger, intentional life. And today's conversation checks all those boxes. Remember to grab your copy from Panic to Peace. That's your free guide and a must if you or a loved one is struggling with stress or anxiety. Or join one of our safe, supportive online communities. Of course, everything can be found by visiting katechampionauthor.com. And whether you're listening for the first time or you're a regular, please know I appreciate you, I support you, and I thank you for listening today. Okay, my friends, here's Pat. Hello, Pat. It's so nice to meet you and connect today. Thank you for coming on the show. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Kate. Well, actually, I may have invited myself, but whatever. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
I am so excited today because Pat did reach out and we are connected through the Nonfiction Network. So I recognized her name and she did reach out and I thought, oh, what a great opportunity. And then obviously I just wanted to do a little background. So I downloaded one of your books and just your memoir and just realized that we had so many connections. I had no idea. So yes, so it's even more fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So where are you from originally and where are you coming in from today?
Okay, so I was born just outside London, in Surrey. Well, it was Surrey at the time, but it's now a London borough. But yes, I was born there and I lived the first 59 years of my life in the UK in various places. Then when I was 57, I emigrated to New Zealand with my husband and my 16-year-old daughter. And I've been here ever since. I'm now 73. I'm very proud of my age. So people often say, don't tell people your age. And I think, no, that's ridiculous. I'm happy. I'm excited to have got to this age. Yes, so now I'm in New Zealand and I'm an author and on my own. I have no husband anymore, sadly. He dumped me a few years ago. Yes, so a brief précis of my life.
Okay. So I do want you, you do have quite a backstory. And I'm just kind of digging into your memoir. And I think that something that really resonated with me is kind of growing up in Southeast England and, the freedom, right? The struggle, right? And also, but the freedom. You talk about these, well, maybe my words, these endless summers, and you talk about kind of going to camp. And so tell us a little bit about your upbringing and what shaped you, and a little bit about you.
Okay, well, I think, I'm not sure if everyone will agree with this, but I think as a child, your upbringing is your norm. You just assume that is what the world is. So until I was 11 and I went to big school, I just thought I just lived in a nice, happy family. But then I realized when I went to the big school that I was actually a bit second rate in many people's eyes, because I came from a council estate. We didn't have a car, we didn't have a television, we never went on holidays. And suddenly I was kind of thrust into the real world. So until the age of 11, my world was quite rosy and happy and jolly. And I went to a nice little primary school. And it came as a shock to me, and very, very, very quickly, because I was quite smart. I was in a grammar stream class with some very wealthy girls. One girl was driven to school in a Rolls Royce, chauffeured Rolls Royce. And there was me, who lived opposite the school in a little council house. So the contrast was huge. And I very, very quickly realized that the only way I was going to change my life was myself. I had to do it myself. My parents were lovely. They were very loving, very caring, but they had no money and no real possibilities. I was the eldest of four. And so at the age of 13, I decided to start earning money. And I walked around to the local shop and I said, I'd like to be a paper girl. Now, this is in the 1960s when the world was a totally different place. And they just laughed at me. They said, no, girls don't do paper rounds. And I said, well, please let me. I promise I'll be really good. Just give me a week's trial. You don't have to pay me. And so I did. I had to borrow my dad's bike because I didn't even have a bicycle. And he had to lower the saddle for me every day. I went out at 6:30 in the morning before school, 6 days a week, and then Sundays as well. And I hated it. I hated the dark. I hated dogs. The bag was so heavy it nearly pulled me off the bike. But I was determined. I just so much wanted to earn some money so I could buy initially some clothes. That was my big deal. And that was the start of it. And so I did that paper round until I started work at 16. I've always been quite driven, not by money, but by achieving more in my life and having a better life than the one I started, which was very loving. It was a very loving home, but poor.
Yeah. Then in our pre-chat, you shared with me that you were married at 20, right? We were laughing a little bit about, our younger days and how we just don't know. So would you mind just sharing a little bit about,
Yes,
what kind of getting married and
Yeah. I wasn't allowed boyfriends till I was 16. So my first boyfriend I was with for 18 months until I found out he was dating a girl who lived around the corner. So that was pretty ghastly. Then I had a few little boyfriends, and then I had a really nice one, but my mum didn't approve of him because he had long hair. This was in the 60s and all the young men had long hair, and he was a carpenter. He wasn't quite what mum wanted for me. She wanted something better. And so I was dating this guy very happily. I went on holiday. I sent him postcards every day. I bought him a bottle of expensive French aftershave. I'd only been at work a year, so I didn't have much money. And on the coach, we went on a national coach down to Devon. My girlfriend and I, we went youth hosteling. And on the way back, I met this guy. And he was tall, dark, handsome, a salesman. And within 10 minutes, I was in love. In my head. And I saw him for a year. He lived 50 miles away. So I only saw him once a week. Easy to be on your best behavior once a week. So I got married against my parents' wishes. And 3 days later on my honeymoon, I realized I'd made the worst mistake, just the worst mistake. But I stuck it out for 14 years, trying to make it better through affairs. And he had affairs. He wouldn't let me have children. He had a really bad temper. So when I was 33, I left. And since I had quite a lot more romantic experiences, you might say.
That's a lovely story.
But I realized, Kate, now that I was incredibly unworldly and naive and was like a lamb to the slaughter. I mean, in those days, you knew very little, you had very little experience. It was a different world. And yeah, I had no idea, absolutely no idea what I was getting into at all. And because I'd come from a very loving home, I assumed everyone in the world was very loving. So I'm suddenly thrust into this environment with this tall, strong man who had a bad temper. And I just didn't know how to handle it. And I'm sure there's an awful lot of women still in that sort of situation.
So now we're talking about so much more, right? We're talking about kind of courage and really having to grow up fast and kind of, I don't know, seeing another side of life that you had no idea existed. I mean, that can be pretty terrifying for a 20-year-old.
And the stupid thing is, I mean, looking back, it's very easy to be smart in hindsight. But looking back, I was very silly because I never told anyone that there were any issues. So for 14 years, I tried to deal with it all on my own because it was a pride thing, I guess. I didn't want anyone to know that I'd made a mistake. So I never told my parents, or friends. But after I left him, my dad said, thank goodness, he said, it means your mum won't cry every time you go home now, because apparently she knew, they knew, but they didn't broach the subject with me. And equally, when I left, they never said, I told you shouldn't have married him. So they were very good in that respect. Very good. Yeah.
Very kind, very supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you have children from your daughter?
No, we were going to have 2 children. That was always the plan. Before you get married, you have all these rosy dreams and ideals. And we were going to have 2 children. And then he kept putting it off. I mean, we were young. So he kept saying, oh, let's wait another year. And then eventually, after 7 years, he admitted he didn't actually want babies. He didn't really like babies. So I packed my bag all ready to leave. And he said, no, wait. If you stay, we'll adopt a child. But it's got to be older than 5. Because I don't want you to give up work. So we had a business by that stage. So I fell for all that. We went through the adoption, which is heartbreaking for anyone who's gone through that. You have to bare your soul to all and sundry. And then they kind of offered us children, but they weren't suitable for him. And then myself and the social workers realized that he actually didn't want to do it at all. But it still took me 2 years before I finally left, despite everything. So, yes, to answer your question, no children.
No children. Yeah. So I just want to take a breath there, right? I just really want to kind of take a breath and kind of honor your experience, because now you're talking about your 20s into your early 30s, and, you went through so much, right? So much by yourself, like every day trying to figure it out, so much heartbreak, so many twists and turns. I just want to really take a moment to kind of honor that. And the courage it must have taken to leave. I mean, what was that like? I mean, was there a moment, I don't know if you want to answer this or not, I'm going to ask, was there a moment where it was like, okay, I'm done, never again, right? Was there a moment, like a light bulb moment, or was it just a death by 1,000 cuts?
I think it was a combination of both. It was death by 1,000 cuts. When I actually finally left, I felt incredibly guilty for leaving him, which was stupid. Because for 3 weeks he tried to get me back, and then he moved in with his rich girlfriend, who'd obviously been on the scene a long time. So and rented out our house, which I had walked away from because I felt guilty. So long story, but basically the thing that really prompted me to go was I went to the doctors about, I guess, 18 months before I finally left. And I very rarely went to the doctors. I'm touch wood, pretty healthy person. But I went because I had a very swollen thumb. It was like this fat. And I remember sitting in his surgery, a very big Indian gentleman, lovely man, and Dr. Mehta. And he said, why are you here? I never see you. And I said, I've got this sore thumb. So I kind of held up my thumb like this, and he just flipped it, which of course made me jump because it was full of poison, so very painful. He said, oh yes, bit of poison there. Now tell me what's really wrong with you. And I just sat and cried for 20 minutes in his room. And he said, I thought so. He said, when you came a few years ago with that bad back, had he kicked you? And I said, yeah. He said, yes. He said, well, if this is against my religion, he said, but you must leave him. He said, I don't believe in divorce, but you must leave him before he kills you. And that was like the green light that opened it up for me. I thought, okay, someone in authority feels that I'm not just being dramatic or sensitive or, whatever. But it still took me 18 months to go. And I didn't tell him until 3 days before I moved because I was quite scared. And I just said, I'm hiring a van. I'm moving out on Saturday, but I'm just taking like my books, my clothes, my paperweights, my teapots. Sounds ridiculous now because I had a beautiful home. And he said, you won't last. You've only ever been with your parents and me. He said, you'll be back. And of course, that made me more determined not to. But yeah, it was a hard time, but I've had harder times since. So, it was kind of a build up to the harder times, I think.
Yeah. Wow. So again, I just want to, when you were telling me the story about, the doctor and the doctor's office and what he kind of shared with you, kind of like had kind of goosebumps, right? I mean, those types of interventions, if you want to call it, or pivotal, I like them pivotal moments, right? Those pivotal moments in life where something really comes in and just changes everything, And in our pre-chat, we talked a little bit about that, right? We talked a little bit about kind of being 20 and having no clue, right, where you would be today or where I would be today. We're both on other side. I was born in England. We were actually raised very close to each other.
Very close, yeah.
You're now in New Zealand. I'm in the United States. I mean, there's been so many twists and turns. I'm early 60s, you're in your 70s. I mean, it's just like, you just don't know, right? You don't know what is ahead of you. Yeah. So what else? Tell me more. When did you start writing? When did that come into your life?
Well, just before, when I was 67, my second husband of 26 years announced that he didn't love me anymore, hadn't loved me properly for years, didn't want to live in New Zealand, and the marriage was over. This all happened in the UK when we were over there for our daughter's. She went over there to do her master's, so we were there for that. So that was a bit of a blow, you can imagine. I had to come back here all alone. He never came back, so I had to deal with everything. And then a year later, COVID hit. So I'm in my little house, because obviously I had to downsize. In my little house, my daughter was still living and working in London. I had no family here, absolutely nobody. So COVID was hard. So I spent the first 3 weeks lying on the sofa, eating too much chocolate, drinking too much red wine, and watching rubbish on Netflix. And then I thought, Pat, just get a grip. This could go on for a few more weeks, because at the time we really thought COVID was only a short-term thing, didn't we? I thought, just do something. Don't waste all your time. Why don't you write a book? So I just got out lots of bits of paper, literally spread myself all around the house and started writing. And my first book, Daisy, was written in 2 weeks. Just came out of my head. Just obviously, I really believe that everything is inside you and it just needs the right time to come out. In fact, when I do my author talks now, I often say that it's like someone's taken off the top of my head and 70 years worth of words are just flying out. Because I find writing so easy. I mean, I've got a girlfriend who runs a magazine in Spain, and she often will text me and say, Pat, could you just write me a little story or article for that, because we've got a gap in the magazine. And within a couple of hours, I've just thought of something and done it. So I feel very blessed that obviously I've always had that inside me, but it wasn't until that time, COVID time, that I did it. So I published my first book just before my 70th birthday. I've done 8. I've just published my 8th one. And I'm not going to stop now until I die. I mean, I just have found my passion. It's wonderful. And to be honest, Kate, it's kept my sanity, because going through that kind of trauma when you're a bit old is quite hard. You know, everything you've worked all your life for is suddenly gone, and you're alone, and you need something to fill that gap. I can understand why women take lovers to fill the gap. But I've taken on writing instead.
Writing, right, creating. That's
if there's a fabulous man out there who I would like as a lover, then that's another option. I will always write.
That door is open too, right? That door is open too. But I mean, and as you're talking,
as you're talking about the writing and the creative process, and you were just glowing. I mean, you could just see the joy kind of like oozing from you as you talk about kind of writing and putting words on the paper.
Yeah, I think because as a little girl, I've got a picture on my desk of me when I was 11, and I've got this like raggedy haircut that obviously mum did, and a little secondhand dress and stuff. And I often look at that picture and say, it's going to be all right, Pat, you'll be fine. Because at that age, I was very small, very insecure. And yeah, I think that's why I'm enjoying it so much, because I feel that despite everything that's happened to me, I've kind of triumphed, and I'm now, okay, this is it. I am a person of some worth,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'd like to just kind of pause for a moment and just say, have you say that again, that after really kind of 70 years of major twists and turns and ups and downs and some pretty major challenges, you feel, you started writing, in your 7th decade, which is so cool. Yeah. And you really feel like you've kind of come into your own, right? I mean, you really feel like you've come into your own. And I think I really want people to hear that is, it's never too late. I mean, I wrote a book. It's called Never Too Late. It is really never too late. Right? Yeah.
No, it absolutely isn't. And I just feel very blessed that I've had the opportunity to do it, really, because the last book I just wrote was my parents' life story, but fictionalized, knowing what I know. I felt so sad writing it. I cried all the time writing it, because they were both incredibly good people, but never had chances in life to achieve what they wanted to, really. I mean, my mother would have been a great writer. She had so much in her head, but she ended up very sad and regretful and slightly bitter, because life had run her down. So I feel doubly grateful that I've had a better life than she has.
Yeah. Generationally, there's just so much there. I mean, that's a really whole multi-generational time frame, culture, history, and then where we are in the world, especially for women, right? I mean, that's a whole nother. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So in the pre-chat, we were also talking about traveling, right? We were talking about, because in your memoir, you talk about camp, right? Kind of going to camp and having these kind of days of freedom and how wonderful it was for you. And I was connecting because, again, in England, I remember these long, long summers that just went on forever and ever. And you and I both have a kind of a gypsy spirit. We've traveled a lot. We've lived in other countries. So tell me a little bit about and we were talking about why we think travel is so important. So tell me about traveling and kind of some of your favorite things, and then why, what has it brought to your life, right? The richness. Tell me more about that.
I think it's brought everything to my life. To be perfectly honest, as I said, I grew up in a poor but very loving but poor family. And so my first time of going abroad was when I went to Yugoslavia on a school trip. I was 15. The only way I got to go was because Mum had taken an insurance policy out when I was little, and it matured at exactly the time. So that's serendipity, the time, and it was the right amount, 15 shillings or something, which dates me back to the dark ages. But that opened my eyes completely, because we went by boat, and then on a train across Europe. And in those days, the borders were all tightly guarded. So the border patrols would get on and you'd have to show your passport. And I mean, for a little 15-year-old girl who'd never been anywhere, done anything, it was so exciting. I mean, I can still feel those same feelings that I felt then. Wow. I just loved I loved the whole experience. And that really made me very determined that I was always going to travel. Then when I was 18, nearly 19, or actually probably 19, just before, about 6 months before I got married to my first husband, he won a competition for a holiday. And he was all set to go on one of those, do you remember those budget all-in-one holidays to Spain, where everything was... and I said, actually, that's a bit boring. Why don't we go somewhere else? So I persuaded him to go to Tunisia in North Africa. He was beside himself. This was like 1970, I guess, 69, 70, when ordinary people didn't travel so much. And he just, I thought he was going to have a nervous breakdown. But for me, it was glorious. And that kind of opened my eyes. And then I kind of pushed to do other things. And then independently, I've been to Egypt all on my own when I was 40, after another heartbreak, which we haven't gone into. So I think because I have an overriding passion for people, I love to meet people all over the world. I don't consider myself a tourist. I'm a traveler. Yeah. So I go to these places. I never go on conducted tours. I hate anything that's formalized. So I'll just book a flight, go off. Like when I was in Egypt, I just booked a flight, went off. Everyone at home was quite worried about me because I was still a little bit heartbroken. I had the most glorious time. I just booked myself into a hotel in Luxor. I went wandering off with all these locals back to their little villages and met all their families. I had a very brief romance with a very attractive young Frenchman. I was 41 and he was 25, and that really helped my broken heart. So you can't do those things unless you've got a very open mind, And that, I just love people, and I love hearing how other people live. And it made me realize that worldwide, regardless of race or religion or whatever, everyone wants the same thing. They just want their families to be safe and happy with a roof over their head and enough food to eat. And basically that's the bottom line. There's no difference to people anywhere in the world, really. Endlessly fascinating. I mean, I just love travel. Sadly, now I'm a bit poor and old, so I'm struggling a bit. But I'm not struggling that much because I am taking myself off to the States this year to catch up with a few other writers and things like that. So I'm very open to still doing things while I can. I think that's the secret, Kate. You're too young to know this, but you get to a point, and I'm 73 now, where you become very aware of your own mortality. And you think, I might only have another 20 years. I might only have another 10 good years. I've got to just get on and do these things while I can. So that's what credit cards are for, I think, to enable you to do all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I kind of call that never too late lifestyle, right? That you just really... Yeah. Living to your full potential, right? Really living intentionally and really living to your full potential. I mean, I think there has to be some wisdom, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah, you have to be.
Yeah, but not holding back, not being fearful. So what would you say about, I mean, I'm sure there's been times of kind of fear and discomfort. I know there has for me traveling and when you book one of these solo trips, I'm sure there's a little clenching in the guts, like, what have I just done? I know there's excitement as well. So if you were giving listeners some kind of tips and strategy, someone's on the fence, they're thinking maybe they want to go to China or Tunisia or wherever, and give us some tips, give us some strategies, give us some wisdom.
I think just always be aware that you could be in danger, but the chances are you're not going to be. So just always be aware of your surroundings. Never walk along with headphones in or stuff like that. Because I often see people do that. I think, why are you doing that? That's crazy. You can't see what's happening. Always have a bag that's really close to your body. But be open and friendly. And I think if someone once said to me, if you walk with your head up and look confident, you will be fine. And that's served me very well. I mean, there's been a few times when I realized perhaps I haven't been awfully sensible. Like when I was in Egypt, I went with these guys who I'd just met their family briefly. And they said, shall we take you over to the Valley of the Kings? And I said, yeah, that would be lovely, which is obviously on the other bank. And I said, but I don't really want to go on the tourist ferry. Is there another way? Oh, yeah, come with us on our ferry, which is like horses and carts and bags of produce and things like that, which was perfect. So we got over there. We did like Tutankhamun and all that stuff. And then they said, now we'll take you, because one of them had a car. He said, now we'll take you to the Valley of the Nobles, to the next village across. And because there's a tomb there that's really untouched, tourists don't go there. So I thought, yes, perfect, just up my street. So it's this tiny little village, and then you go down and you can't see the tombs because they're all just mud. And he got a key and opened this metal door, and we went down. And I don't know if have you ever been into a tomb in Egypt? No. You kind of go down like that. They're very deep in the ground. And so we're going down, and it's pitch dark, and one of them had a torch. And I've got these two handsome Egyptians, one at the front and one behind, and no one else. And I'm thinking, maybe this isn't your most sensible move, because nobody knew I was there. I mean, they could have with me and left me in the tomb, and no one would have been any wiser, because I didn't tell the hotel where I was going or anything. And we got down to the bottom, and he turned the torch around, and I just nearly burst into tears. There were these magnificent tomb paintings, because of course no one went there, so the air hadn't really gotten to it. There was not. Whereas in the Valley of the Kings, they're more, they're more exposed. It was so glorious. And then eventually we came up to the top, and all the little village kids were there waiting, trying to get me to buy their little carved cats and things, which of course I did. And then I was invited into the village hall for mint tea, and it was just glorious. So it was a wonderful experience, but that was one of those moments when I thought, maybe not your best move, Pat. But my daughter worries about me because she knows she's heard enough stories. And when I go away, she always says to me, Mum, please don't take too many risks. She's 30 now, and she's from my second husband. I could see you looking a bit puzzled. I had her when I was 43 after losing 2 other babies. So she's very precious. But yeah, she's inherited a lot of my traits, a lot of my adventurous spirits, but she worries about me, this old lady going off on her own, possibly doing very silly things.
I have to. You do not have an old lady spirit, let me tell you. Sitting with Pat today, she is light and fun and I don't know, just full of love, full of life, full of energy. It's beautiful, really lovely, really lovely.
Thank you, Kate. Well, in my head, I'm still 35.
Well, so, I see that. You get that spirit is still 35.
But it's an awful shock when I look in the mirror and I think, how did that happen? How did I get to be this old lady? Because I really do feel 35. But interestingly, I still remember all the emotions I used to have when I was a teenager. I think if you've had a lot of experiences, and you're probably the same, it kind of stays deep inside you. And maybe that's why I appreciate life more, because I've had those bad times. Yeah.
Again, we've talked about challenges, right? How challenges kind of really do inform our lives. And again, standing at 20 and looking forward, I mean, you wouldn't have predicted your life. I wouldn't have predicted my life. And there's been joys, but there's also been a lot of challenges, right? And I don't know about you, but I'm not sitting at 60 with a whole bunch of regrets, right? I'm not like, poor me. I'm not, oh my gosh, right?
I actually have no regrets. I mean, people often say to me, I bet you wish you'd left your first husband sooner. I wish you'd done this. And I think actually no, because I needed to go through all those experiences to get to where I am today. I wrote a book. I didn't want to write this book last year, called The Abandoned Wives Handbook. I was happily writing another novel, and this idea just came to me in the middle of the night, which as an author, you'll know that feeling. You get this idea. If you don't write it down then, by the morning it's gone. Never to return. And so, And so I kept putting it off, and the idea kept coming into my head. And I thought, I just better write this. So I wrote this just to help other women going through a similar thing. And ironically, it's my best-selling book.
Is it really? What is it called again?
It's called The Abandoned Wives Handbook.
Okay. So what do you think people...
So it's tiny. It's just tiny, so it fits into a handbag. And I've done it like I call it a dictionary of distress. So I've just done little headings under each alphabetical thing, just not preachy or anything, just kind of saying how you might feel and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and so obviously I was meant to write it because it is helping other people. I get some really nice responses, but I never, and obviously that's why I had to go through it myself, so that I could write this book to help other people. But didn't realize that at the time. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. 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 So let me pause for a minute. I'm curious, like, what are you feeling? What's coming up? What's happening in you and your body right now? I'm just so curious. What's coming up for you?
I feel very happy and kind of a slightly warm, fuzzy feeling talking to you, because I think I'm not private. I'm very open, but I only talk to people I trust about my personal feelings, really. So it's really nice to be able to share like this in a public format. I don't care how many millions of people watch it, but it's very nice to feel heard, if you like. To be talking to someone who obviously understands. Because a lot of people who haven't had much trauma in their lives, I mean, they've obviously lost parents and that sort of thing, but if they haven't had a lot of trauma, they don't understand the depth of emotion, I think. Because I've got lots of friends who are lovely, but their life has been relatively plain sailing. They've still got the same husbands after 50 years. Their kids have all done well. They haven't got any financial worries. And so they can't, lovely as they are, they don't understand in the same way. Yeah.
So if you find yourself in that position, right, that you do feel a little bit like an outlier, what would you suggest for a listener who might be in that spot right now? How might you coach them?
It's really hard not to get a little bit squashed. Particularly as a single woman, you don't get invited out as much as you did when you had a partner. So you always feel on the edge of everything, really. I think you just have to kind of just accept that's your lot and try and just make the best of it. Because if you pine for another kind of life, you're just going to make yourself utterly miserable. You just kind of just got to think, okay, this is it. I'm going to just try and make the best with what I've got, rather than, I used to have beautiful houses and a red sports car and enough money to not worry about when the bills came. I could easily think, I wish I still had that, but it achieves nothing. Occasionally I have a little weep and a wail and, I've spent all my life working, now I've got virtually nothing. But it doesn't help me as a person. It's not going to help me get through the next 10, 20 years. And so I think you just have to try and look on the bright side, if possible. Some people can't. I had a sister and she couldn't, and she ended up committing suicide. So I very much understand that I'm blessed because I do have a relatively sunny nature and I'm very determined. So I'm lucky. I realize I'm lucky. But yeah, I think because I grew up with a mother who was unhappy with her lot and was very much full of regrets of what she didn't achieve and couldn't achieve, that probably as a little girl I was very determined that I wasn't going to end up like that. She was lovely and sure, she was a wonderful mother and stuff, but I just always knew that she was sad. And I didn't want to be that sad person. But I understand why people become like it, because it's very easy when things aren't going your way. It's very easy to go right down. And I've done it myself many times. But I've been lucky that I can always bounce back up. I kind of shove myself back up,
Well, there's one of those pivotal moments, right? Something kind of comes along, a door opens, you're in despair and you feel like it's all kind of coming in, but then something comes along. At least that's been in my experience, right? Something comes, right? Yeah. And having trust or faith or belief in that, I think can be helpful.
That's huge. Yes, that's huge. I've still got the same faith that I had when I was a 7-year-old going to Sunday school, with God on a fluffy cloud looking after me. And I still have that. I don't go to church anymore, but I have a one-to-one hotline to God, and I talk to him all the time. that has got me through, definitely. Because we all need something to believe in. I don't think it matters what you believe in, as long as you believe in something higher than you. Because otherwise we're just little people. How are we ever going to deal with all the dreadful stuff going on in the world and going on in our lives?
I really resonate with that. I mean, I don't have I have a similar probably beginning, Church of England and whatever, right? I have a similar kind of foundation, but now I do have beliefs now, but it's not it's not the traditional beliefs, but I do have some pretty big spiritual beliefs, like that we are all part of this unknown, massive, infinite kind of universe, and we are all connected, and we're all here with gifts, and we all have a purpose, and doors will constantly open until we die, right?
Absolutely. I agree entirely, Kate. I mean, I've got friends in Morocco who are obviously Muslim. I've got friends who are Buddhist, or all sorts of things. And when we talk, we all believe the same. Ultimately, we all believe in a higher being of some sort. And that's all that matters. I think if you've just got something. For me, writing has definitely saved me, because without my writing, I would be sitting here alone in my little house, probably getting involved with an unsuitable man just to fill in my time. It's wonderful because I don't have to do any of that. I just have my writing. I have my friends. I travel a bit. I have my garden. I love gardening. So I think we all need something that's just something we can cling on to.
Yeah, that's lovely. So again, so much resonates. It's just like soul sisters or something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, this is a great example, right? If you hadn't been writing, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. We wouldn't be getting this out to the world. Hopefully somebody else is listening and they're being lifted up, right? And that's what it's about.
It is absolutely what it's about. Yeah.
Or an article or whatever, right? It's just, Go ahead. Sorry.
I firmly believe that we're all here in this world to help each other. Otherwise, what's the point being here? Are we just here to make money and die? I mean,
Yeah. All right, so let's take a breath. We've covered a lot of ground. It's been amazing. Is there anything else you want to kind of add or say, or I don't know, anything else on your heart or on your mind?
I just think from my experience, life is wonderful, but you've kind of got to learn to go with the ups and downs. You just got to hang on and just know that something else is around the corner. It may not be better. It will just be different. But never, I think, just never give up. And I think having had a sister who did give up, I'm very, very aware, that those are the two choices in life. In fact, when Lucy, my daughter, was growing up, and, as a teenager, they get very dramatic and whatever. And I used to say to her, darling, life will never be perfect. But you have two choices always. You either get up and deal with it, or you give up like Auntie Margaret did. And I felt bad using my sister as an example, but those are the choices in life, aren't they? You can either just get on with it and try and make the best of it, or give up entirely. And for me, giving up was never an option. I mean, there were times when I felt like it, obviously.
Sure.
But and like before I had Lucy, I lost 2 babies, and I was in my 40s, and that was ghastly because I thought I was never going to be a mother. So that was really hard. And then I had Lucy, and all's well. But, I've had a lot of times in my life when I have been utterly despairing, thinking, okay, this is it. My life's over. I can't do this anymore. But then something has just helped me to cope. So I do feel that, I mean, I see friends who are dealing with things and kind of not able to get through them very well. And I just feel sad for them, because however much advice you give, it's got to come from within yourself, doesn't it? You can give loads and loads of advice, but you can't live someone else's life for them. because you don't really know what else is going on in their life, you know. We all react very differently to things.
That's right. That's powerful. As a therapist, people think, oh, I'm an advice giver, but I'm not. It's the last thing. I don't give advice, right? Because we can't walk in somebody else's shoes, right? And my life isn't their life, so you have to help people kind of come to their own, right? You can help come alongside. You can't, or they should. I love these conversations, right? They should do this, they need to do that. The problem is, right, all that. It's like we just don't know what another person is going through. We just don't.
No, it's so funny because I went to a party on Saturday night and I got chatting to this lady who happens to be a neighbour, but I'd never met her before. A very nice lady. And we just had a very brief thing. She was interested in my author stuff, so I just gave her a brief précis. And she said, have you had much counselling? And I said, no, never. She said, well, how have you got through all your life without counselling? I said, well, funnily enough, after my first marriage, I remember sitting in the lawyer's office. I was 33 years old. I'd walked away from everything because, he was difficult. So I left him the house, the business, everything. And I remember sitting in the lawyer's office and the lawyer saying to me, who knew us both very well, but Pat, you are entitled to this much, this much. I said, no, Malcolm, I don't want anything. I just want a quick divorce. And he said, well, you must have some counselling. You must see somebody. So this was in the 80s when counselling wasn't such a big deal in the UK. And I said, no, I don't need to talk to anybody. Because to me, it would be worse talking to somebody than trying to deal with it myself. But in hindsight, I probably should have had some counselling because very soon after that marriage, I was involved with another man who moved in with me. And I didn't want it really. But it took 2.5 years for me to pluck up my courage to say, excuse me, this isn't really working for me. Do you mind moving out of, do you mind if I move out? So counselling probably would have been good. But I've never had it. I've always just battled on and hope for the best. Yeah.
So that's somewhere we do different. I've had a ton of therapy, and I have to tell you, it's been really helpful. Really helpful. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Each their own, right? This is your own journey.
But I think, Kate, it's not because I'm against therapy. It's just because I have this innate feeling that, and probably because when I was 11, I decided it was down to me to make my life better. That's probably stuck with me. So now I feel, okay, Pat, you've got yourself in this mess. You get yourself out of it. You don't need to involve anyone else. But that's not the right approach. I think counselling, if you get the right counsellor, is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to say, let's not even judge that, right? Let's not make it what's right and what's wrong. Let's just say we got two women here, right, with two different experiences, and one's thriving with and one's thriving without it, right? So there's no right or wrong. It really is what's right for you, right? What's right for
absolutely.
You. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, I ask everybody the same question, the sage advice question, right? For really living intentionally, right? If you had one piece of sage advice for listeners, with your 70 plus years of wisdom.
I know it's actually very lovely, Kate, to be so old and wise because people do listen and take you seriously. They think, oh, she's old. She must know what she's talking about, which is such a joke. But no, but I think you just have to literally take every day as it comes, because you don't know what's around the corner. And if you did know what's around the corner, you might not venture around the corner because it might not be what you hope for. So I think, just try and not stress about things that you won't stress about on your deathbed. Like when you're on your deathbed, all you're going to care about is your family and the people you love, ultimately. You're not going to care about what job you did, how much money you have, nothing. So ultimately, just try and live your life being mindful that one day it will end. And so try and just deal with every day as it comes and just try and make the most of it and be happy. I mean, some of it will be shit, and some of it will be wonderful. And you just kind of have to roll with the punches, I think. That's my experience. That's my experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mine too. Again, full of joys and challenges, full of twists and turns. Yeah. And you got to take them both, right? Because they're both coming your way. You know, you can't get through life without any challenges. It's just impossible. Yeah.
And also, I think try not to have too many regrets or be bitter, because the only person you will hurt is yourself. Mm. I mean, I could be full of bitterness and regret for all the men that have done me down. In fact, an old boyfriend that I lived with for 4.5 years between husbands, he read my memoirs. He now lives in Japan, and he phoned me and he said, "Pat, I just want to say, I got very sad reading your memoirs." And I thought, because I put something about him in there. And he said, "All the men in your life have treated you badly, including me." And I just thought, how nice is that? Because that's like an apology. And he was not, I mean, the only thing he did wrong was not want to get married and have children. So, you know, and he was honest about that at the beginning. But I just thought, actually, that's so nice. And I could be all bitter and twisted to him or to any of the others, but the only one that would hurt was me. So there's no point. Just put it down to experience, write a book about it, you know?
There you go. There you go, write a book.
When I wrote my memoirs, several friends who've known me a long time phoned me and said, "Pat, you've been so nice about your exes. You haven't dished the dirt." And I said, no, it's not my way. I don't want to do that. But what I'm doing now by way of revenge, Kate, is I'm writing those really dark bits into my novels. So
love that. Yeah. There you go. Listeners, if your interest is piqued, we will definitely be putting links in the show notes to Pat's work. So Pat, if people want to reach out, if they have questions, if they want to find your books, where can they go? How can people connect with you?
Well, probably the easiest way is my website, which is just patbackley.com. Or I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, whatever, as Pat Backley Author or Pat Backley Books. So I'm pretty, and in fact, if you just type my name into Google, masses comes up. So I'm quite easy to locate. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will make sure that goes into the show notes. And I don't know. I just want to thank you so much for this time today. I just really feel a connection. I so appreciate you reaching out. It's a lovely conversation. I just hope it's helpful for people. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute joy. I can't believe the time has whizzed past so fast. I could talk to you for hours. So anytime you need more chat, just call me. Okay.
I will. Thank you again. We'll connect soon.
So much.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your time. I love to hear from listeners, so connect with me at katechampionauthor.com. Remember to grab your free hiking guide, and please take a quick moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Thanks so much. Take care. Until next time. Hey, me again. Just a reminder, this podcast should not be considered professional advice. It's also not a substitute for mental, physical, or any other healthcare-related treatment. For any questions about your condition and/or concerns, please contact a fully licensed healthcare professional. Thank you.